Chapter 19. The Ornamental Hairpin. The Asahikawa Young Railwaymen's Bible Study Group were holding their regular monthly get-together in the men's hostel, and as usual the speaker was Nobuo Nagano. Among the 15 or 16 men was Mihori, sitting in a corner and looking, as might be expected, as cynical as ever. Nobuo had finished expounding the Bible passage, and everyone was deep in conversation, but Mihori sat alone. His kimono had parted, exposing his knees, and he was hugging them in silence, just watching. Nobuo had no idea what was the cause of Mihori's mood. At last the meeting broke up and the men went home, but Mihori remained sitting fixedly in his place. "You always come. You're a keen attender." Nobuo turned to Mihori with a smile. "Huh, I come for the fun of the thing," said Mihori as if to sidetrack the conversation. "Even if it's just for fun, you'll sooner or later find it really interesting if you never miss a meeting." I don't know what to think. There's no denying that you're a good speaker, Mr. Nagano, but do you really believe in the existence of God?" Mihori stretched out his feet on the frayed brown tatami mats. It was a hot and humid evening in July. "Do you think I talk to everyone about God, but don't believe in him?" "Excuse me for saying this, but whenever I come to listen, I think the whole thing is a fake." "Well, faith is something you either have or don't have. There's nothing I can say in reply to a comment like that," Nobuo answered gently. He wondered why Mihori was perplexed about the existence of God. There could be no doubt that his coming to the meeting showed that he wanted to believe in him. Mihori had become the father of a son and a daughter, one born before the war and one after. "This is a different matter, Mr. Nagano, but they say that when I went to the war, you used to look in at Misa's home now and again." When Mihori left for the front, Misa and her child went to live with Mihori's mother. After he had been away about a month, his mother had collapsed with a stroke and died 4 days later, in spite of Misa's devoted nursing. After that, Misa and her child had moved back to her old home, Reinosuke Wakura's house. Mihori was one of Nobuo Nagano's subordinates, and it was natural that in the course of time, Nobuo should call there. But it was exactly the same as his visits to the homes of other men who had gone to the war. He went in his position as a senior member of his office, and he never went alone. He always took one of his juniors as a companion. Quite apart from that, he had called several times at the invitation of Reinosuke Wakura. I didn't go more than a few times, not even to offer my respects. But Mihori laughed mockingly. "No, you used to drop in from time to time. In spite of the fact that I'm a returned war veteran, Misa seems to look down on me, and in the same breath she says what a fine person you are. She often praises you." "Is that so? But I'm quite unworthy." Nobuo bowed informally. Now he thought he understood Mihori's feelings. The reason why he had started attending the meetings was that Misa's remarks had made him jealous. Mihori left quietly, but his parting words were disturbing. Nobuo recalled how long ago, when Mihori was drunk, he had often called on him and tried to pick a quarrel. Now, thought Nobuo with a twinge of sadness, even without drinking's sake he was being quarrelsome. After his marriage, Mihori had been a happy man. It was when he returned from the war that he had become strangely gloomy. Nobuo assumed that this was because he had seen so many deaths in the fierce fighting. The fact that he never missed a Bible study surely showed that deep down he was searching for something. But this was not really what was the matter with him. The real trouble was that his mother had died while he was away fighting, and he thought angrily that Misa was responsible in some way. If he had been there, somehow or other his mother would still be alive. He could not help thinking. Then, alas, while he was away, Misa had moved back to her old home, and he had an overriding revulsion against becoming a sort of adopted son of the Wakura family. But the third reason for his distress was that Misa spoke too much about Nobuo Nagano. It was not that Mihori did not respect Nobuo in his heart of hearts, but it angered him that Wakura never spoke of Nobuo except to praise him. And as for Misa, when she chimed in, she became strangely hateful to him. Neither of them was trying to disparage Mihori, but he felt that by praising Nagano they were indirectly doing so. Then, involuntarily, Mihori began to suspect that Misa had a fondness for Nobuo. His attendance at the Bible class was certainly not out of any desire to hear about Christ. The two things he had in mind were that he might be able to speak as well as Nobuo could, and to find out how genuine Nobuo's faith really was. Nobuo was eloquent. When he listened, even Mihori found himself drawn along by his speaking. Sometimes as he went back from the class, he wondered seriously whether God did exist or not. It worried him. Once, on a day when Nobuo had been on a business trip and was away from the office, the lunchtime conversation turned to him. "Hey, why doesn't Mr. Nagano get married?" "That fellow, he's not like us ordinary mortals. He doesn't need a woman." "That's not possible. There must be something wrong with him. There's no other reason why he doesn't need a woman." Then Mihori remembered that he had overheard Wakura and Misa talking about Fujiko, but he had not been able to believe that anyone would wait for so many years to marry a person with spinal tuberculosis. Maybe this was just an excuse to turn down Misa, he thought, and maybe, however unlikely, there was something wrong with Nobuo. No, a healthy mind lives in a healthy body. There's nothing wrong with the manager. Kenichi Hara, who had been transferred from Sapporo 2 months before, came up with a counter-argument immediately. Hara had a fierce nature and soon got into arguments with his colleagues and superiors. He was a kind-hearted and earnest fellow, but too excitable, and no one in the Sapporo office could handle him. It was generally accepted that Mr. Nagano and Asahikawa could handle anybody, so here he was. He was immediately attracted by Nobuo's personality. However busy they might be with work, Nobuo always dismissed his juniors promptly at 5 o'clock. Any work that was left, Nobuo did himself, no matter how late he stayed. Just this one thing deeply moved Hara. If anyone made a mistake, Nobuo took all the blame. He did not scold people, but in spite of this, he was a good leader. He was gentle, but he had a firmness which was hard to go against. As far as Hara was concerned, everything Nobuo Nagano did was absolutely right. It's going too far, saying there's something wrong with the manager. This was the first time that Hara, who had been peaceful since moving to the Asahikawa office, had revealed his fiery temperament. "Well then, Hara, why doesn't Mr. Nagano get married? Soon he'll be 30, I guess. Nowadays, if someone is still single at nearly 30, it's natural to think it a bit strange," Mihori chaffed him. Hara's face flushed as if he was being strangled. "What's that? If you speak badly of the manager, I won't just do nothing about it." Hara got up from his seat and closed in on Mihori. "Mr. Mihori, do you have proof? What proof have you that there is something wrong with the manager? The fact that he has reached this age and hasn't married, that's proof enough." "Is that what you call proof?" "A person who is fit to be the manager's wife doesn't just turn up anywhere. You wait and see. It's certain that he'll marry someone like an angel, even you'd feel like worshipping." His words had a strangely persuasive power. Someone who felt the same way chimed in. "Yes, that's it. Mr. Nagano's going to marry a stunner." At this, Hara became a little calmer. From that time on, Mihori imagined that Nobuo was probably sexually abnormal. He could not believe that a normal, healthy man could live just for this world of business and the church, without even having a woman now and again. A man has a man's desires, he thought. They are just the same as his appetite for food. Since he ate food, it would be natural that Nobuo had sexual desires too. To say, like the dedicated Buddhist priest, that he had finished with them seemed to him to be a great hypocrisy. Nagano had never told a dirty story. Whenever he opened his mouth, it was to speak about the faith. There must be something false somewhere. He'll show himself in his true colors one day, thought Mihori, and kept a spiteful eye on Nobuo. One day when Nobuo returned from church, a letter from his mother was waiting for him. It was a letter of thanks for the money he had recently been in the habit of sending home each month. Taking off his suit, he changed into a summer kimono. He had only one suit for going out, his railwayman's uniform. Whether at work or in church, this single faded suit served all his needs. It was so faded that simply by noting its color you could tell it was Nobuo. Sitting up formally in his cool kimono, he carefully opened the letter with scissors. Kiku's writing was beautiful, as always. On the paper of the rolled letter, the contrast of the light and dark tones was fresh, and the characters were written flowingly. "It continues to be hot every day, and at this time of year it will be as hot where you are, as in Tokyo. So do be careful to avoid heat stroke and bad water. I want to thank you for sending so much of your precious salary this month. Kishimoto, Machiko, and both their children are standing up to the heat and keep well, so please don't worry about them. We are all very glad to hear from you that Fujiko is so much better and that you hope to get married next spring. You have waited a long time for her because of her serious illness. Even though you are my own child, without any prejudice, I think it is splendid of you. I hope you will not think badly of my suggestion, but when you get married, if it is God's will, I long and wait for you to come back to Tokyo together. One reason is that Fujiko was born in Tokyo, and I'm sure that she would find living in Tokyo more tolerable than in Asahikawa, where the cold is so severe. I understand your feelings when you say that you will do the cooking and the washing, but a man has a man's work to do. If you lived here, I could help, even a little. Also in the near future, Kishimoto is setting up a practice in Osaka, and I shall be alone in this house. Nobuo remembered that Kishimoto had mentioned 2 or 3 years as a suitable length of time for him to live in Hokkaido, and he himself had had the same idea, but had not acted on it. The previous year, Kishimoto had gained his doctor's degree, but he had been unable to leave the home in Hongo. Maybe I have put him to some trouble, thought Nobuo regretfully. Now he too considered that, just as his mother Kiku had said, it would be better for Fujiko's health if they returned to Tokyo. To leave the Sunday school, which was flourishing, would be hard. However, it would be unkind to ask his mother to come up to Hokkaido. It would be difficult for him to get a transfer to Tokyo, but in the circumstances, it would be better if he left his present job. Nobuo was hoping that, if possible, he might enter a theological college. It would be hard to train as a minister and to support both his mother and Fujiko, but being who they were, he believed they would be equal to the hardship and give him wholehearted support. If they should find it impossible to make ends meet, Nobuo would think of something when that time came. Therefore, do not be anxious, saying, "What shall we eat?" or "What shall we drink?" or "What shall we wear?" For the Gentiles seek all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be yours as well. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Let the day's own trouble be sufficient for the day. Nobuo had spoken these words of Christ many times to others, and could not tell how often he had weighed their importance. The last time he had been to Sapporo, Fujiko had said to him, "Nobuo, do you think the work you are doing now is your true work? Isn't it true that you are thinking about a different way of life?" She had asked it with her round, bright eyes shining. That's just like Fujiko, Nobuo had thought at the time. Can you understand it too, Fujiko? Yes, I understand. You have feelings about a life worth living, living for God and dying for Him. Nobuo, the thing you want most is not money, nor a high place in society, is it? You just want to live a life of faith. Living a life of faith doesn't necessarily mean becoming a minister, but I have a feeling you were born to be a minister. Nobuo had been thinking about this continually, and with the coming of his mother's letter, he made up his mind. He would ask Wakura and see if it was possible to get a transfer to Tokyo next spring. All the railways had already come under national control, and Asahikawa's had changed from being a private railway company to a national one. Anyway, next April, I'll return with Fujiko to Tokyo, Nobuo decided. Meanwhile, there was the matter of an engagement present for Fujiko. He did not like taking her the betrothal money, for to him the custom smacked of buying and selling women. However, it would be too bad if her family, who were not wealthy, were saddled with the expenses of the wedding. Not only that, but the Yoshikawas had a child now, and it would be very difficult for them. So Nobuo resolved to give his year-end bonus as an engagement present. That would mean that the engagement would be finally settled as the new year began. It was still 6 months away, but he would like Mr. and Mrs. Wakura to be the official go-betweens. At the end of November, Nobuo went to Wakura's house with Osamu Yoshikawa. They walked together shoulder to shoulder through the streets covered with the snow which would lie there till the spring. Yoshikawa was taller and stouter, and in every way looked older than Nobuo. "I have a very strange feeling," said Yoshikawa. "What do you mean?" Well, It's a feeling that we are somehow blood relations. A little while ago, I remembered the time when we were fourth formers in the junior school, ghost hunting. Yes, that was real ghost hunting. They said you could hear someone crying in the senior girls' cloakrooms, and everyone was scared it was a ghost or something. That was a black, rainy night, wasn't it? Nobuo remembered how only Yoshikawa and himself had kept their promise to go. In his case, because his father had scolded him and he had had no alternative. Yoshikawa had been different. He had kept his promise and come, but he had never bragged about it. But for his father's scolding that night, he and Yoshikawa would never have become such good friends. Yoshikawa, it was because of you that I came to Hokkaido, and here I found my faith and Fujiko. His tone of voice expressed his gratitude. Fujiko's a lucky girl. Yoshikawa was smitten to the heart when he thought again about Nobuo's faithfulness in waiting so long for Fujiko. I'm lucky too. With you as a brother and Fujiko as a wife, there could not be anything better. Do you really think that? Said Yoshikawa with emotion. They had told Wakura beforehand that they would be calling. Nobuo did the introductions. I see. It's his young sister, is it? Well, I can understand Nagano's feelings. It seemed that Wakura approved of Yoshikawa at first sight. I'm sorry to trouble you, but I would like the wedding to be next spring, and we would like you to be the go-between. Yoshikawa and Nobuo bowed respectfully. Well, is she so much better already? Wakura glanced back at his wife, who was coming in with the tea, with a look of surprise. Hey, did you hear that? The girl Nagano has been waiting for. She's cured. That's wonderful, just wonderful. Wakura was really amazed. But it must have seemed a long time to wait. Your name is Nagano, and it's been a long story. You've waited 7 years, haven't you? Jovially, Wakura counted off the years on his big fingers. When our Misa hears this, she'll be really glad, Mrs. Wakura said. At that time, Misa was living in one of the railway company houses about a block away. Misa, well, we'll not talk about that now. Anyway, congratulations. Wakura seated himself in a formal posture and bowed. On January the 3rd, in the new year, Nobuo visited Fujiko's home in Sapporo. It was a relatively warm and calm afternoon with snow gently falling. Yoshikawa's wife and his mother, sitting in the living room, diffused the genial mood of the new year. But Nobuo could not see Fujiko, the most important person. She's just gone to buy something. She'll be back in a moment. Nobuo smiled at the friendly insight of Yoshikawa's wife. He was happy. Although it could be said to be a warm day, it was the middle of winter, and it seemed like a dream, just to think that Fujiko was able to go out in the depths of winter. At last she came back, wearing a deep red shawl. Her white face was pink from the cold air outside. Surely this was a sign that she was well again, and Nobuo became unbearably happy. When Fujiko had concluded her formal New Year's greeting, she showed the soft shawl to Nobuo and said, "It's a lovely shawl, isn't it, Nobuo? Osamu and his wife bought it for me at the end of last year. This is the first time I've worn a shawl." Fujiko had a silver ornamental pin in the front of her hair, which was done in the divided peach style. "Won't you catch a cold going outside?" "I'm all right. This winter I haven't had a single cold. The next time you come to Sapporo, Nobuo, I'll meet you at the station." As she said this, Fujiko became shy and Gano, one of the Japanese characters in the name Nagano means long, blushed. The artless expression on her face was charming. "Is that true, Fujiko?" Yoshikawa said teasingly. Nobuo imagined what Fujiko would look like, standing in her red shawl by the ticket barrier. When he thought of her as she had lain in bed for so many years, she seemed to be unbelievably fortunate. The conversation turned to fixing the date for the engagement ceremony. Nobuo would have liked to have it in the middle of January if possible, but Yoshikawa's wife was expecting another baby then. Once into February, because of Sunday school and work commitments, Nobuo could not take a day off easily. Looking at the brand new calendar, they finally decided on the evening of the 28th day of February. "It's a bit late in the month, isn't it? There'll be all sorts of things to get ready." Nobuo looked thoughtful. "What do you mean?" "The shops here only send out their bills at Obon and the New Year, so we could do something on credit even if we didn't have the money to hand," said Yoshikawa casually. Nobuo felt relieved. "Well then, I understand. We'll leave the engagement ceremony until then. But on the 27th of February, a branch of the Young Railwaymen's Christian Association is being formed in Nyoro. I simply have to be at that. Nobuo decided that he would set out from Nyoro on the morning of the 28th, join Wakura and his wife, the go-betweens, in Asahikawa, and proceed to Sapporo. Mr. Nagano, the fact that you are marrying a girl like Fujiko, Yoshikawa's mother was moved to tears. Fujiko's recovery had removed the strain she had been living under, but now she seemed to have grown old quite suddenly. Looking at her, Nobuo could not help feeling that his mother, Kiku, must have aged too. But then, in April, he was going to Tokyo with Fujiko. Fujiko and he, the two of them, would take the greatest care of his mother. "I've got a hankering to go back to Tokyo too," Yoshikawa's mother said, as if reading his thoughts. She sounded disgruntled, a rare thing for her. "You'll soon be in Tokyo, all right. About this time next year, Fujiko will be sending you a letter asking you to come and help with the first baby." Yoshikawa was teasing again. "You horrid brother." Fujiko flushed scarlet and hid her face. The ornamental pin trembled in her hair. Yoshikawa's mother and his wife laughed together. It was a happy time. When Nobuo said he must be leaving, Fujiko said she would go with him to the station. "Thanks very much, Fujiko, but I'll just look forward to when you come to meet me next time." "But that's in the future. I want to see you off. Big brother, can I?" Well. Yoshikawa looked at Nobuo. It was not like Fujiko to be so insistent. "Thank you very much, but you've already been out once today. It's cold by now, and you ought to take proper care of yourself, especially since you have come all this way to recovery." Fujiko at last nodded meekly. She had always immediately done everything Nobuo told her. "Why do you always do what I say, Fujiko?" Whenever Nobuo had asked that, she would reply self-consciously, "It's in Ephesians chapter 5. "I see. Now you've set me a poser. But in Ephesians chapter 5, there's something for you. Wives, be subject to your husbands, as to the Lord. Even so, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies." So Nobuo found it very strange that Fujiko should have insisted on going with him to the station. Even after he had returned to Asahikawa, he kept wondering whether Fujiko had caught a cold, and if her old illness had broken out again. Perhaps she had even contracted pneumonia and would die suddenly.